What's up guys, Jaden Irwin here with Little Sticks. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. This is part 2 of the Sanity and Astro crash course. So if you haven't watched part 1 yet, I would recommend going there first. But let's just go ahead and get started. This part, we're going to be setting up a global settings object or a global settings file. So think of it like your fallback SEO. So if you've used tools like WordPress or Squarespace, this is really popular and it is a very base idea for websites, which that's what we're building here with Sanity and Astro. So we're really going to build this concept of a fallback SEO object. So if you haven't provided a specific title and description and open graph image for the page, then we want the whole site to fall back to this global settings, global title, global description, global open graph image, right? And the first thing you're going to want to do is actually go to the link in the description below. And I already have set up this part 2 starter files branch. So you're probably going to want to start from scratch. I know that's kind of frustrating maybe for those of you that went through part 1, but it might be easiest for you honestly to just clone part 2 starter files, because it is just picking up where part 1 left off, but it has some of the boilerplate that Astro is going to need for what we're building. Hey there, future me here. I forgot to mention at this point a really crucial piece if you're coming from part 1, probably regardless anyways if you're jumping in at part 2. But I did want to remind you, if you're coming from part 1 and you already set up a project, a Sanity project, you are going to want to go to your Sanity files and then go to your sanity.config.js that you had set up from part 1. And your project ID is going to be different than what you're cloning in the starter files. So just keep that in mind. You are going to want to make sure you take note of the project ID that you set up on part 1. Go ahead and copy that, paste it into the sanity.config.js file, and then also go to Astro, and just like we did in part 1, astro.config.mjs, make sure that your project ID matches there as well. Your other pieces there should be the same: API version, use CDN. If you rename the dataset something different, that's fine. But yeah, just wanted to interject here and remind people that your project ID isn't going to be the project ID that you're cloning. So just keep that in mind. And back to past me. It honestly is just a time saver, so you're not watching me copy and paste boilerplate files. And most of honestly what's in there is in the source. You have components. There's this base head component that I created, and this actually is pretty much a direct copy from my Astro Sanity minimal starter repo. I'll put a link in the description below for that as well. And then the other piece is the layouts. So there's now a base layout and a page layout on the Astro side. If you want to have an extra description about how those work, I can do that in probably another video. But they're pretty straightforward. There's just a base head component, and then there's a base layout and a page layout. And the page layout extends the base layout. And they all use the base head. So it kind of passes this head component down into all of those. So you have SEO being pulled down in. And it'll make more sense once we get into that component and hooking it up to Sanity. But it just kind of saves some time, setting up the boilerplate for Astro. So go ahead and clone the part 2 starter files, and it should be very similar to what you had in the part 1 on the Sanity side. Most of those changes are on the Astro side. After you've done that, you should have your Astro and Sanity folders, and then you're going to want to open terminals at each of those. So I just kind of set that up in VS Code. If you want to put that in your extra terminal file or your terminal app that you're using, that's fine. But I like to use the VS Code one. So then we have Sanity and Astro. We're going to go to our Sanity folder, and we're going to do npx sanity dev. So that's going to use Sanity to run the dev command, and that's running on localhost 3333. Very similar to our last video, npm run dev on the Astro side, and that's running on localhost 3000. So if we go over to those, we should have it running. So there's our desk, just like we had in the first video. And then localhost 3000, we are going to have an error, and that's okay. We're actually going to be fixing this here in a little bit. But let's go ahead and get our global SEO settings set up. So inside of Sanity, we're going to go to the schemas folder, and then we're going to create a new file called sitesettings.js. And inside of this, we're going to do an import define type, and then define field. And that's going to be from Sanity. Now we're going to do export default define type. So Copilot's helping us out a little bit there. And then we're going to do a name called site settings based off of, the same title of the file that we used. You can call this just settings if you want to. I just like to be a little bit more specific. And then our title, our type is going to be document. And then we have a fields array. So this is where most of the magic happens inside of this fields array. But our name, right? So define type, we have a name called site settings. This is like what the API uses to understand what the schema name is. And then our title, right? That's the visible title inside of the Sanity Desk. And we have our type document. And then this fields array, that's where we're going to set up our individual fields for this type, this schema type. So we're going to do define field. This is a helper function for the V3 Studio. So if you have used Sanity before, this might be new to you. But this is honestly just for code completion. It's a very TypeScript concept too. So it's helping with the TypeScript setup as well. So if you are using TypeScript, you are going to want to use these helper functions. I believe it still kind of works without them. It is backwards compatible with the V2 version of Sanity, where this define field and define type did not exist. But you probably going forward are going to want to write your schemas with this define field and define type helper functions. So inside the define field object, we're going to do a name called title, and then we're going to do a title called title. And Copilot's just going to help us out a little bit here, just for the sake of time. So we have define field, name, title, and string. So the types, if you want to learn about the types that are possible, you can just go to Sanity docs. I believe there's beta docs as well too. And let's go back to documentation. So get started with Sanity, and they have some excellent documentation about the types that are available to you and how to customize those. There's also a migration guide if you're coming from Studio V2 to V3. Very useful. So sanity.io/docs. And then let's go back here. We're going to do another field though. So comma, define field. Inside of this one is going to be our description. And then type text. So string would be an individual line of text, and then type text would be more multi-line, right? We're going to do another one, define field. This one's not going to be keywords. We're actually going to do OG image. You can call this open graph image if you want. I like to abbreviate that one a little bit. Title, open graph image, and then type image. Let's close that out. And there's our 3 fields. So let's actually get this showing up inside of Sanity Studio. To do that, we have created this file, but Sanity actually doesn't know that this schema exists yet because we haven't passed it into our schema types. So this index.js file that you have that's coming from our blog setup, it already is using the post, the author, the category, and the block content files, right? So those are already imported. So you might guess that all we need to do, add a comma here, do site settings. VS Code's automatically going to import that for us. So site settings from site settings. Let's go ahead and save it. And if we go back to our Sanity Desk, there is site settings right there. So that's great. If we open this up, I already kind of have one in my Sanity Studio just from playing around with it. Let me go ahead and delete it real quick. But if we go to this site settings and we click on this pencil here, that would create a new document for our site settings. But you might have noticed that there's a problem if I create this and then I create another one, right? If I save that and then create another one, we don't really want that to happen, right? We don't really want two site settings files because there's really only supposed to be one global site setting: site title, description, open graph image, right? This is global. It's only needs to exist once. So that's where customizing your Sanity Studio kind of is a requirement, honestly, if you're trying to go beyond just the basic blog post and authors, right? So what we're going to do is actually set up a custom desk structure on our Sanity Studio. That way you don't have this possibility to create multiple site settings because we really only need one. So let's go ahead and make sure that doesn't exist yet. I'm going to close it out. And to do this custom desk structure, it's actually pretty easy. We're going to go and create a new folder. I like to call this my source folder. This would be any of the other files that are not schemas and obviously not static files. So I like to put it in that source folder, and that actually matches Astro's setup with source folders too. And we're going to do a new folder inside of our source folder called structure. And then I like to just put an index.js in that. You could just do a structure.js if you wanted to. This is just preference, honestly. I like to do structure and then index.js. And the reason for that is I'm probably going to end up wanting other files next to the structure file, right? So I just like to have an index there. All preference. If you want to do structure.js, you totally can. Now we're going to go inside of this index.js under structure, source, and then structure. And we are going to create a custom structure. This is where it might look a little crazy if you're not used to Sanity. We're going to do export const structure. This might look actually different if you're already used to Sanity too. Because this is a v3 thing where everything is JavaScript and TypeScript with Sanity, right? So they've moved away from this concept of really custom parts and really custom like plugins type of things that are happening under the hood. They've tried to make it a little bit more transparent as an API where everything feels like JavaScript and TypeScript, which I really appreciate myself. So what we're going to do here is do export const structure. So this is just a constant. And then we are going to do S. This is kind of like a special Sanity object. And then we're going to do context. And we're actually not really going to use the context right now, but this is just going to be an arrow function. And then we're going to jump to the next line. And this is going to be S dot, and Copilot's getting a little bit ahead of us, list. And then we're going to do dot title content. So this is the content of the site. And we're going to do dot items, S dot list item. So the title of that list item is going to be site settings. And then the child of this list item, right? So you can kind of see how it starts nesting down pretty quickly, is going to be s.editor. The ID, so this is an editor with an ID in it, right? And we're presetting the ID for this specific document. Dot schema type site settings, dot document ID site settings, dot, I'm going to add one more in here, dot title site settings. So let's close that out. And what else do we need to close here? Oops. Make sure we get the right order. Perfect. Now, if we save that and we go back to our Sanity Studio, it looks the same. And the reason for that is we haven't actually used this structure. We haven't told Sanity that this is the structure of our desk. And to do that, it's super easy because of the way we've set this up, right? So source, structure, index.js, and there's this constant for structure. So we would go to sanity.config.js. We're going to go to this desk tool that's already imported, right? And then we're going to create an object inside of, oops, I think my autocomplete is freaking out just a little bit. There we go. So we're going to open that up, and this desk tool is just going to use structure. And we need to import structure. Remember, that is a named export. So import structure from, this is going to be source, structure, and we probably can just leave that there. Now if we go back to our Sanity Studio, there's this site settings right here, content that we named, right? So content is the site content. And if you go back to your setup here, we can do site content. Notice that the whole thing refreshes with that change, and there's site content. So site settings, and we have untitled here because we haven't added a title. It does pull from this title here. I'm not sure if that's a bug or not, but I did manually set a title for site settings, and it's not showing here, but that's okay. Not too important what this displayed title is, to be honest. But let's go ahead and set our title, and this is going to be Sanity plus Astro crash course, something like that. This is the description for the Sanity plus Astro crash course. And I don't know if we have any images in here. That's okay. We don't have to worry about the open graph image quite yet. We're just going to really worry about this title and description. So let's go ahead and publish that. Notice that it takes just a second. Document was published, and then it updated the title up here. That's great. But now you might be wondering, okay, where'd the other stuff go? The post, the author, all of that. And the reason why those disappeared is because we have specified that our desk structure should look exactly like this. We've sort of taken complete control over the desk. And once you do that, you do have to kind of think about, okay, I want to make sure all of my other schemas that are not specified in here still show up. And to do that, you're going to go below, and what we're going to do is spread. So it's still inside of the items, right? It's still inside of this items list, right? This s.list. We are going to go ahead and spread s, so that s special object, right? Dot, and I believe Copilot's pretty darn close, but I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to copy and paste what I've got here just to save some time. We'll add a comma. Oh, make sure this is in the array. There we go. So inside of this s.list item, it ends right here, right? So then we're going to spread underneath that s.documentListItems.filter. So it's filtering, and then the list item, so it's going through and making sure anything that does not match whatever we give it here, it includes list item.getID. So really, to break that down, there's a filter, and anything that doesn't match this in this list will show up. So if I save that and go back, notice that we get post, author, category, all of those, right? So this filter is looking for anything that doesn't match whatever's in this list. So site settings is in here. If I remove it, we might have to just comment the whole thing because the filter is not happy about nothing being there. But there you go. If I remove that whole thing, we're back to just the one. If I go here, we're going to make sure site settings is not on there. And then let's add post in here as a filter. Well, there goes the post. Let's add post category. And is that what it's called? Oh, it's called category. So we'll save that. There goes the category. And then same concept for the author. I believe they're also just called author. So there you go. So we're back to just the site settings up here just by adding in these filters. So I'm going to comment all of those out. We are going to end up using them and doing a completely custom desk structure. But right now we're okay with just it automatically pulling in everything that doesn't match this filter. So if you need to just look at that, copy and paste it, that's okay. This is more of a Sanity specific type filter thing that's happening. But yeah, pretty straightforward. It kind of makes sense once you realize, okay, this is just adding everything that doesn't match whatever I put in here. So now we have site settings, post, author category, right? Site settings is at the top, which is actually what I want. I want to kind of keep those site settings located near the top because they are global, right? So from here, you're probably wondering, okay, so we have this in Sanity, but how would Astro access it? And it would be very similar to what we did in the first part. So we would go into Astro, we're going to go to our source, and we're going to go to the lib folder, and then api.js. And what we first want to do is just make sure that this is coming through from Sanity, right? So export async function. Copilot is just crazy. It's doing something about very next-like, it looks like. But we're going to do get site settings. And I am going to just kind of save some time here. So const query equals GROQ. So just our GROQ tag. And then we're going to do type equals site settings. So whatever filter equals site settings. And then we have const site settings await use Sanity client. And then we are fetching with the query that we just used, right? The query is being passed in. And then return site settings. So it is going to send back the site settings that it gets from this query. And also what we're going to do is add an ID. So make sure our ID equals site settings. And you might be wondering, okay, well, where's that ID coming from? That actually is coming from our desk structure. So remember we right here did document ID site settings. So the actual ID of this document, you can confirm it too. Go to the 3 dots up here in Sanity and then inspect. And then there you go. We've got an ID of site settings. So this specific document has an ID of site settings. There is no other site settings document out there with that ID. So that's perfect. We want to specifically get this document with this title and this description. So we're going to go back to our API, make sure that looks good. Now we're going to go to our pages, index.astro. This will be a lot like what we did in the first video. And we're actually just going to import from here, get site settings, const settings equals await get site settings. And let's just JSON stringify settings. I'm just going to kind of reuse what we have there. Oh, and we still got an error on our base head. I'm wondering if there's an easy way around that temporarily. We can just go to our base layout. And I commented out the base head for now. But there we go. So we've got welcome to Sanity plus Astro crash course. We're back to an ugly design because I removed most of those styles. But yeah, so we've got our ID site settings. We've got site settings right here for the type, updated at, and then we've got description and title. So there we go. That's exactly what we want, the title and description for the site. So now let's start passing this into the base head. And to do that, we're actually going to go back to our pages, right? And this same concept of await get site settings, we're going to pass that into the base head directly, right? So we're going to delete that. We're going to delete it from here too. And let's just pass first post in there again. Let's go to our basehead.astro. So source components, basehead.astro. And what I've set up here is everything minus the actual query that we just set up. So we're going to do const settings equals await get site settings. And then VS Code does that auto import for us, which is really nice. So const settings equals await get site settings. So now we have settings.title.description. .url doesn't exist yet. And then our image, that's going to need a little bit of work, but we'll probably save that for the next video because we haven't gotten into how to deal with images quite yet. Really, let's just focus on the description and the title and probably this URL too. We haven't done that quite yet. and it's probably going to be grumpy about that. So let's just comment out some canonical URLs for now. We'll just focus on that title and description. Oh, and we'll comment out the image as well. So just comment out all the red. But there you go. First post looks good. Let's go ahead and inspect the page. Okay. So get site settings. I think I know what's happening here. And it might be best to actually go back and show you. Let's undo. So const settings equals await get site settings. Let's comment that. So we still have this stringify settings, right? So notice here, it's probably easier to see this way actually. So you have an index with an object, right? So this is only one object, but you have a whole array with one object in it. So you might be guessing, okay, well, I just want to access this object that has the site settings in it. And to do that, we're going to go to our get site settings function, and on our GROQ query, we're going to limit it to just the first item that comes back from that. So there you go, object at 0. So there you go, we have lost the array wrapper. And if we go back to our head tag, now we've got OG title, Sanity plus Astro crash course. This is the description for Sanity plus Astro crash course. So that looks great. And then let's go back, let's get this settings.url idea in here too. We're going to uncomment that. And then we're going to uncomment this canonical, uncomment those. So there is no URL yet. You might be wondering, okay, so how do we add that? We're going to close some things out here. We're going to go back to our site settings.js and let's add a new field. So define field. This is the global URL for the site. So name, we could put a favicon in there too. Maybe that's a little code challenge for you guys. And we're just going to do URL. Type URL is fine. You could do a string if you want, but I kind of like the validation of a URL field. Let's go back to our desk, and maybe I want to put this above our OG image. I'm going to move it up. So we have title, description, and URL. And this is going to be HTTPS sanitycrashcourse.com, something like that. Publish. And then let's go ahead. We're going to go back over here. I don't know if it'll show up right away with our URL, but pretty quickly. Yeah, so there we go. OG URL, sanitycrashcourse.com right there. And I can make that larger for you guys too. But there you go. We've got our OG URL. This is the canonical URL, right? Which is great SEO practice. Make sure that you're passing in canonicals for the page. This canonical URL it's not really going to be the best practice to pass this in globally necessarily, but it would be fine to just have a fallback for the site, right? So each page that we end up generating is going to automatically set the canonical for us. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But that's really all I had for this part. I hope it's not too confusing. I hope I broke it down pretty well in setting up a custom desk structure and setting up global site settings. So you can imagine, right, if I'm on this basic home page, we have a title and description that has not been set for this home page, but it's globally falling back to it. So yeah, that's really what I've got so far. In the next part, we're going to be kind of diving deeper into GROQ, diving deeper into queries, and how to set up a page builder eventually. Probably not in the next part, but yeah, that's really what we're building up to. So how could I build out components that come from Sanity and automatically build pages from those components. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it and hope you're following along, enjoying the content here. I feel like this is a really good segment of an awesome stack with Sanity and Astro. So it seems like you guys really liked the first part, and I hope you guys enjoy it and stay tuned. Peace.